I think the title, somebody titled my talk as Why CalSim3. I kind of thought about, well, that's it could be a little trick question, but the simplest answer to me was like, because there is CalSim2, the natural progression has to be 3. So it may be that there is CalSim3, the verb may change, there was calcium, I said there is CalSim2, and the CalSim2 may go into the history. And that's the journey that we are about to take today, from the beta to the final. And we like your participation. That's what we're seeking. That's the sole purpose of us getting together for the next couple of days. We're going to spill out everything that we know to you in 2 days. Granted, it'll be overwhelming. There's a lot of people getting into these lines and files and folders. I've seen all of the presentation beforehand. Early this week, I've been spending a lot of my time looking at their presentation. We talk over the phone and that sort of stuff. There's this overwhelming amount of information in the next couple of days, the second half of today and into tomorrow. I think, if you feel way oversaturated, rest assured, we're thinking about doing a separate workshop that will solely be dedicated for issue by issue. Certain modules are so huge to be talked about and understood in like 30 minutes. All right, that's all the time that the speakers will have. So we are thinking about expand that into like a hands-on, I kind of like hands-on workshop. People, instructors sort of explain, then you bring your own laptop, play with the code and give a little sample problem, give you like 5-10 minutes to solve it, come back and share the answers and stuff. That's how you really become a good user of that model and through that process. Not only we like to transmit it to you what we have, but furthermore, solicit your comments and review back to CalSim. So, having said that, how do I move? Are you going to move it? Okay, thanks. Down, just use that down. Okay, thanks. Division of labor, bullet number 3. Joe Bate covered real well. That's the agreement we have. And if you look at the agenda, the lineup of all the speakers are all from DWL. You may wonder. That is because of division of labor. DWL has given the charge to take care of Sacramento Valley. We'll talk about Sacramento Valley in the next couple of days. Soon, Reclamation, Joe Bate and the team is going to come up with the San Joaquin Valley portion of the CalSim3. That'll be similar workshop as this one. It could be a couple of days once again and an in-depth workshop, hands-on experience, that sort of stuff. We'll see how it's going to turn out. This division of labor has been working out fantastic. Joe Bate talked about the prior days of CalSim2. I lived through those periods. We used to have a model called DWL-Sim and ProSim at the Cottage Way. And I ended up spending inordinate amount of my time checking up on the data. I got to look at your data, what goes into ProSim. Likewise, the Cottage Way people come out and say, what goes into DWL-Sim? Compare. Not only the data and the method, how to treat the data to turn it into some form of information which will be useful for decision support process. So both data and method. This has been a godsend, at least for these 2 agencies, Reclamation and DWL. We don't necessarily agree on everything every day, understandably. That might be an understatement, between Reclamation and DWL. But we at least put one thing behind the data, hydrologic data, inflow data, reservoir storage capacity, flood control, that sort of stuff. Put that thing behind and get to the subject matter, policy matters. So it really speeds up, quickly elevate to the policy level discussion rather quickly. And we hope Reclamation and DWR hope to continue to expand these processes, successful prototype between these two agencies to other agencies, public, private. There's a people, there's a private consultants representing the interest of their clients. Nothing wrong with it. In fact, that's their job. Could we get together, use this vehicle as an opportunity to do what we have been doing with reclamation? Look at it real closely, review and comment, and continue to improve and polish upon. So when we have to face that differences, agency level differences, we can really focus on dive into it rather than get lagged behind on the data and method and spend inordinate amount of time. So it learned from us what Joe Bai said and what I said. It's been true, and I think it'll continue to be true. And Joe Bai mentioned a lot of activities going on at the Cottage Way. They got their own set of talents. So is DWR. So this collaboration, I think it's a great way for us engineers and scientists. We don't want to debate in public forum for things that only you and I can understand. You quickly, if Paul Hutton and I disagree on things, I think it's best for us to sit down and talk it over and look at the numbers and stuff, rather than write a paper, opinion paper in the Sacramento Bee, and I do my own, the Twitter account, and that's not the way it will resolve any problem for science and engineering. So I think that's been our experience between reclamation and DWR. We strongly urge and suggest. A lot of you folks are already doing this, and I think there's been a great payoff for that effort. And I think one of the direct motivation, that's the purpose, I think the first two bullets, is there was CalSim. We didn't know how to version it early on. I forget even the year. Then we have CalSim3, simply because it's after CalSim was CalSim2, and I forget that year also. But the transition between 2 and 3, one of the direct motivation was the peer review done in 2003, opinion issued in 2004. We did a response and that sort of thing. So 3 addresses a lot of those comments done 10-some years ago. So it's slightly behind. 2011, Joe Bai said, was the target date of CalSim3 release. Let's be honest, some of you probably never believe CalSim3, that thing will never be daylighted, right? Because we always talk about, we go to QAMP and say, we're going to do this, and, misfire toward the end of the year. But it's real. 1 week prior to my retirement date, that was a great gift, the greatest gift ever given to me as part of my retirement. So I think I'm going to get a yellow card real soon, so we'll see how it goes. So the first point, I covered that already. We want this to be a public forum through which a lot of innovative ideas would come to the table, try it out in private or in a collective setting, in a group setting. And if we stop doing it at that point, I don't think it'll be all that useful. We ought to take the next step of the journey, wrangle all those ideas, polish all of them, let the ideas compete, and find the winner out of that. That competition, I'm not trying to soften up any kind of conflict among us. I think it's a good thing for us to have disagreement. Let's have it in this forum among us in the most effective way possible. That's the proposition we've been making all along. And I think we've done that to a large extent, and the payoff has been great. There's quite a number of processes that are going on right now, these conflict processes. But because of the investment we made early on through this public vetting process, we've gotten past that. We don't debate hydrology in the Sacramento anymore in any kind of conflict situation. So that is a good payoff we've been having. Then the second stage is put those ideas into a useful, relevant, and practical packaging. so it'll be directly useful for our problems. So what are the uses? This is somewhat of a academic, but I kind of thought it might be useful for us to kind of just think about these items, I think, before you really get rained on by these heavy-duty talks, soon after my talk. Problem solving, as we go through this public bidding process, collection of ideas, innovation, let them compete, find the winner, polish all that up, wrangle that, integrate it into the usable, practical package. It's useful. Sometimes it's even good as a diagnostic tool. Do we even have a problem? Oftentimes, problem doesn't exist only in perception. So this tool has been proven and used. Do we really have a problem? People talk about it should be this way, it should be the other way. The model was deployed in that setting only to find there's about 5,000 acre-feet of differences, and by itself is just, resolved. It's not worth talking about it. Is that real or perceived? So then from that, definition of the problem, could we clearly define the problem before we try to solve it? The tool has been very useful when we deploy it in that sense. And then once it is clearly defined, the tool has been used in multiple projects. Water fix would be one example, looking at what options do we have to tackle this problem, alternative generation. Then the tool also been used evaluating those options and selecting the best one, sort of stuff. So it's been proven to be a very useful tool, the CalSim, as a problem solving the vehicle. Then the second bullet, I put it in here, just kind of reiterate the thought that I shared with you early on. We all represent different clients and different government level, county, city, some private client, state, public. There's always different agencies they all have different objectives and goals. Their missions and goals are not all alike. As a result, we do have items to talk it over. If you have a common tool in which data and method are co-owned, co-developed, pre-screened, ironed out, you get to the core, heart of the conflict rather quickly. And again, I can cite a number of examples in which CalSim has been deployed and successfully used in conflict. Some of the conflicts are still going on, But it's not because of the method or the data. To ensure this public forum concept, public vehicle in which ideas are tried, tested, and experimented, more like a laboratory. We, at this we means now I take an exception, not the joint we, the reclamation and DWR, because federal governments by law are not allowed to license any software. They got to just leak it out and just public domain, and whoever want to do it, they do it. State, on the other hand, are bound by a different set of laws. We have legal authority to copyright software. So we had it copyrighted using GPL, General Public License, or Eclipse Public License. I'm not going to go over those details, but just simply put, GPL is very inclusive and encompassing for the entire software of application, where EPL is very partial and focused. So if anyone is interested in it, you can certainly study it. As you download the software, all the code, you're going to see the license agreement right there. And you can further make reference to if you would like to study further. That is to ensure the sustainability of this public nature of this software. So the investment that we made today and in the months to follow, to be in that within the goal of that intent to be freely available to the public. And the second effort is free of charge. We made an inordinate amount of effort to make it completely free. The early version of CalSim, although all the development we did at DWL and Reclamation was available free of charge down to the code level. These two were exceptions. I think some of the early users of CalSim would attest to that. I see faces like that. Derek is nodding his head. You have to buy a Fortran and LP solver called XA. We really went extra mile to resolve that. First of all, we got rid of Fortran in this CalSim3 release, so you don't have to have a Fortran code. Second thing, with the help of Joe Biden and his contribution and the funding, we contracted UC Davis mathematics department people, and they created a free LP solver, as fast and as good as XA. We tested. We're confident, and we're releasing that as part of our CalSim3 release. Therefore, the whole thing is completely free of charge. I think it is essential to make it completely free, because these talents don't necessarily go with the wealth. So we thought it's very important that anyone with any amount of or no financial resources be able to access this code and run it free of charge. So the new ideas can come in freely. So that was like Joe Biden funding UC Davis mathematics department project. I think it's been going on for a couple of years, right?
3 years.
3 years. So we had the tenacity. We persevered through that project. And with the outcome is I'm happy to report to you, it's a well done software. We compared with XA in many different angles. It does, like I just said, is at least as good, except it's for free. I kind of made this random list of items because like I said at the outset, I went through all of the presentation. I spoke with the presenters, just all of them, without any exception, in detail of their presentation material. And I thought it might be helpful if I go over this, especially for those who choose to leave after the part 1 this morning. This will get you a little bit idea on the general construct of the CalSim3. So start out with the RESL, Water Resources Engineering Simulation Language. At the outset of CalSim, say, so to speak, CalSim1, we created a brand new language. So some people are good at Fortran, those are computer programming language, Java, Visual Basic, whatever it may be, C++ and all that. RESL is just another language, except it's a lot simpler. So I think there's about a dozen or so command. That's all you have to study. I think the doc manual for RESL is still probably less than 20 pages, right? That's my memory. Yeah. So how long would it take to master 20-page manual? Give yourself like 20 to 40 hours. You're going to be a master of that RESL. That's the whole idea of creating a brand new computer language suitable for CalSim. So with RESL, then Fortran used to come in to translate the RESL into a format or the construct that's amenable for LP solver. That's the whole purpose of Fortran. Now we got rid of it, the Fortran, through RIMS. Number 3, RIMS, Water Resources Integrated Modeling System. So it's a collection, the genetic name of CalSim3. In fact, the RIMS can be taken to Columbia Basin or Hawaii or Florida, any other water resources systems, and you can apply RIMS over there. And in fact, CalSim3 is simply a subset, one application of RIMS. So RIMS is a very, very genetic code in which you can reset the schematic, reset the inflow, outflow, that sort of stuff. Then the second bullet, DV and SV. SV is the abbreviation of state variable. And the dB is the represent decision variable. That's used in all our operations research technique, any kind of LP, DP, that sort of stuff. SB is a static variable. That's what goes into the model. So that's like an impulse. If you got a system, if this is a system, if I hit the table, you hear the noise. Now, the act that I'm hitting, that's the impulse. So hydrology, flow going into the system. At the boundary, the precipitation, the land use, evapotranspiration, those are all SB, or the impulse, the given set of parameters that are inputted into the system or the model. dB, on the other hand, is the response. The knock or the sound that you hear, that's the response of this system. So what goes in is SB, what comes out is dB. When you look at the output of CalSim3, you see all of it, dB and SB, because sometimes as a model, you want to look at what went in, then you want to look at what came out of the model. So they're all in the DSS file. So that's a system. These terms were not clearly defined because all the presenters, they were so deep in the thick of the matter. So you can certainly approach with that understanding that they were really working on that file and compare lines and stuff. So now all of a sudden they are asked to give a talk. So they just take you right to the folder, the file and lines and that sort of thing. And I noticed that SB and DB were not defined and they just keep using it. So I thought it might be useful. RIMS IDE represent integrated development environment. That is a very, very fun thing. And I think Hao is going to give a talk on that. And I think his time is very limited, 30, 40 minutes at the most. That is one of the candidates for that in-depth analysis. If you are lazy as I am, I want to minimize my computer coding. I don't want to do it any longer. I just want to see what goes in, what comes out. Somebody else made the run, and take the run that, the ID did, and make a few small changes and see what it does. Kind of sensitivity, kind of lazy approach. RIMS ID, I highly, highly recommend you to look at that because it goes from the input, the model execution. You can stop it, take a look at some of the variable, change the value of the variable if you want, right in the middle of the model run. Then the output comes up, does the graphics for you, just like the planning model, 12 months by 94-year table type. It resort out in the water year type if you want. It just selects certain months, like a fall X2 only applies October, November, and December. If you want to pick those 3 months, just examine the fall X2, it gives you that option of doing it. So it's really, the custom fit into the CalSim3 application, although the whole RIMS IDE is generic enough to be used elsewhere. So those are the things that I was talking about. So we're going to continue to entertain your input as to what will be the format of next wave of public workshop. Hands-on, would that be a good thing, bad thing, or, So we will continue to solicit, your input as when we try to determine next wave of, I mean like a February and into March kind of workshop, for more like a hands-on focused workshop. Next bullet is CU model. CU model is consumptive use model. It used to take let me just make the story real short, 2 to 3 months. I tell my staff, hey, go update the consumptive use, or change the land use and get me the consumptive use in the Sacramento Valley. I'm not making this up. It used to take 2 to 3 months for me to see the answer to that because there's a lot of computation. Even with the DSA, depletion study area, I'm ahead of myself without defining what it is I'm using, that jargon, but you're going to see what soon as we get into the individual speech or the talk presentation. But now, we put them all together into calcium hydro, and it runs 30 minutes. So 2 months condensed into 30 minutes. Granted, the computer gotten faster. So, but the software, it's mostly the software, the effort that we put in. So there's a great advance in the calcium hydro. It's really, to me, it's a lot of fun. In fact, that'll be another candidate for an in-depth, hands-on kind of workshop, because you look at the entire Sacramento Valley and look at all the land uses, and you have the option of changing it. Oh, 2015 was a very dry, in the middle, on the tail end of the actual drought, and some lands were put out of production. They idled that, right? And you want to see the effect of how much water, the real water, do we get to see down in the delta, arriving at the delta? Calcium hydro is one way to do it. It's fun in that sense. You go change the land use, from whatever the crop to idle, and net effect. Because hydrology is not a simple summation or subtraction game. You got a groundwater going on, stream aquifer interaction. They all interactive too. It's non-linear on top of that. So try to figure that out, just by hand. Will really, one, it's going to be impossible, and two, if you continue to try, it'll drive you crazy. Hydro, you get a lot of help on that. Groundwater DLL, IWFM, it's just like the genetic code of the groundwater model. C2BSIM is a specific application of IWFM. What is the integrated water flow model? Is that it, John? Just like the RIMS, it's a RIMS counterpart. And specific application to the Central Valley is C2BSIM. I think 2B means 2 Bs. Central Valley, what is it?
California Central Valley groundwater surface water simulation.
Okay. C2BSIM. I think I'm not going to remember that one. Then the next bullet is, that's an area, I think, if you represent certain client, like in the Sacramento Valley, that is the chapter I strongly urge you to pay attention to, look at all the numbers. Water right, contract, settlement contract, exchange contract, riparian, native veg, water right, their assignment of different water right. Take a good look at it. We like to have your good review and comments back. Because guess what? One of the ideas that I have, although I'm unemployed at this time, is to use CalSim3 for the water right-based allocation in the Sacramento Valley. There's another unemployed employee of the State Water Resources Control Board called Les Grover. I spoke with him yesterday over the phone, and he was actually thinking about that too. It was kind of funny. So, oh man, you're thinking the same way. So it's only a beginning, but you pay attention to that, and take a good review. Those number after numbers, table after table. Take a good look at it. Give us a comment on it. And I think it's, Joe Bade, it really applies to you guys too. I want you to guys, because you got Shasta, Folsom, all of that, all the settlement contract, we treat it and line it all up the way we see it fit. But I want to make sure that that's what you guys are thinking. So that chapter, I think, is really worth spending some of your staff's time. ET and land use. Always a difficult thing to get a hold of. ET only come in. If you look at the water code, the water use has to be reasonable and beneficial. That's it. So what is reasonable and beneficial uses of water? That's how water lawyers, make their living, right? Those two key words. If you sum up all the water right in the Sacramento Valley, that's about 10 times bigger than the long-term average deliveries in the Sacramento Valley. Understand? We all know that, but people write about it. It shows up on newspaper and they criticize. You guys don't know what you guys meaning, mostly state board and maybe sometimes meaning DWR too. But that's the nature of water right, as opposed to actual deliveries. But actual deliveries is contingent upon ET, which is weather dependent, and the land use. But even ET, how many of you think you can actually measure ET? How many of you seen a thing called lasimeter at the UC Davis? Okay, if you go to UC Davis, I'm out of UC Davis, there's a thing called lasimeter. What it is a big, gigantic soil tank. It just weighs the weight of that tank. Tank is isolated and independent, complete free body. And you water that, irrigate that, you raise crops like corn, and you continuously weigh the weight of that tank, soil and everything all together. And knowing how much water went in, knowing the weather, you try to you think that works? Only to a certain extent. It's a very, very invasive item. So we look at FAO, we work with Rick Schneider, Maury Orang, DSWIM, another department within DWR. So that's tough to get at. So it really gets down to what is reasonable and beneficial uses. We connect those two terms in the water law into this ET. We think this is reasonable and beneficial uses. So the cutoff point, even if you have water right of like 100,000 acre-feet, we just cut it where the ET and the land use suggest. So asserting that that's the beneficial and reasonable water use. If it is 55, that's all you get. It's worth paying attention to those ET and the land use for your client's sake. Historical versus level of development. All the data, field data that we observe and collect and process, they reflect the historical conditions. But in planning, you don't look back in planning. Is anyone planning for the past? Never heard of it, right? Planning is always into the future, sometimes present or into the future. So to reconcile that, the concept of level of development, that's what we adopted to use. Another approach is you let it go, the one sequence, but you got to do it multiple sequence of it to represent 20 years from now on. Because if you just have one deterministic sequence into the future and say, in 20 years from now on, this will be the deterministic point, of course you're going to be wrong, 99.99% of the time. So you got to do multiple sequences. So that there are two approaches doing planning. One is doing a multiple sequence in a realistic sense. Let the land use change over time. Let everything else change over time. Climate change take place over time. And the other approach is what I am proposing and been adopted and used in the CalSim, the level of development. Current level of development is different than historical. 2050 level of development is just a fictitious, imagined, planning purpose only kind of world. Only thing varies there is the hydrologic variance. So land use and everything else, system is fixed, operational, the modus has been fixed. The only thing allowed to change is the hydrologic variance. And see what sort of expectation. That's what planning is all about. What can we expect? I think it's pretty final spatial resolution. That's all we have done, not the temporal scale. Final spatial resolution allow you to go to the spatial detail, making it possible or facilitating regional planning. So one of my goals was take it up to Northern California, CalSim3, and start making a presentation to different board meetings and tell us what is that's needed. It's not at farm gate level yet, but I think at the rate of computer advancing today, I wouldn't be surprised in 5-10 year time frame, CalSim3 will be really simulating at farm gate level, every farmer, every irrigation, every water right holder. So if not then, perhaps regional planning. So it's more amenable for regional planning. which is crucial and critical. In your, for example, what comes to your mind when you talk about regional planning? Sigma. Medium to high priority regions in the valley and otherwise outside of the valley. You got it. Sigma is not just about the groundwater. The water molecule doesn't know the surface or groundwater. It doesn't know the stream versus anything. It just travels wherever gravity dictates. So the sigma, you can't just solve just by looking at the saturated zone. You got to look at the whole system. So I personally think the CalSim3 with the groundwater DLL in place is going to be a vital resource, vital asset in tackling the sigma, down the road some point in time. Drought analysis, I talked about that a little bit. That's kind of my kind of thought, a little bit of a thought. I've been talking to different people, lawyers, and the little call that I had with another unemployed person yesterday. The drought analysis, the final outcome looks like this. We're going to rerun the history, 2011 through 15, every month and every year. We're going to go 13,000 water right holders in the Sacramento Valley and tell them, you have most of them stolen water, especially in the Delta. You have stolen this amount of water. It wasn't belong to you. You over-diverted, especially in the Delta. Rerun that. And then, I'm not a prosecution team like the board did through the BBID hearing. I'm thinking, open that up, create a public forum. This is the answer we get. Can I have your review and comment back? So it's a different approach. During normal peace times, all right? So we can talk. People can talk. And then once it is all settled, then if we get hit by another drought, hey folks, to me it's a societal contract. It's an agreement. Hydrology is never, ever, and never will be an exact science. It's a contract. It's an agreement. How do we coexist with the finite amount of hydrologic water cycle, right? That's the question. So we go through this public vetting process. Everybody has an opportunity to comment. And I even think it may require state legislation at some point in time to have it truly binding, And then next, if you get hit by a next drought, you know the full sequence. Everybody can run on their kitchen table CalSim3 water right module and know exactly how much water they're supposed to get. That is my vision. Then you go beyond the data and method. You go to the policy. How do we share this limited resources in this challenging time, right? That, to me, is our job, engineers and scientists. Get us, ourselves, the collective us, out of that controversy, all right? Not to go testify, my mousetrap is better, state board, I think we got to get past that point and see, we talk it over. We argue in this forum, here. And we offer CalSim3 as a vehicle for that to take place. Water supply estimation, you're going to hear the talk on that, 64 to be exact, upper the watershed. So it's more amenable for hydrologic changes, say climate change, for example. Water demand, there's a remarkable improvement, rice and wetland, and what we have is actually come from different sources like MBK, Walter, Bray, and I understand they put a lot of effort and input contributed to this rice and wetland and urban demand. We got it from statewide, the statewide water management division, Kamya shop, urban demand by groundwater. So now we can identify different water sources. So throughout our presentation, we're going to show you how the whole space has been further disaggregated, so you can see much finer scale. An individual demand center could also have what sort of water source do I have. Before, I mean, everything was lumped. You really cannot sort that out. Groundwater presentation, I went over that. In the model domain, a lot of internal lakes and reservoirs in those ponded area, they are being simulated, so it's a better representation. Period of simulation. A lot of people ask that question, why CalSim2 stops 2003? How many years ago was it? I just couldn't extend that. I could have done it, but it's doubly loading the staff because we were busy working on CalSim3. And in reality, we had 11 more years of data. So 3 now has 2015 as the endpoint. Total of 94 years instead of 83. Close to 1 whole century. So we all love data. The longer the data is, we all like it better. So especially, like I just said, it does include the most recent drought. People remember the recent past. So it kind of makes more sense. 2012 and 13 and 14 makes a lot of sense to them. So we accomplished that goal of including the most recent drought. Calibration and validation last 1998 through 2000. Historical data we use for calibration and validation. Schematics is a lot more refined and structured. Better represent the spatial, the location and the spatial extent. Data documentation. If you ask me to produce comparable CalSim2 document as we have for CalSim3, I'm going to be frank and honest to you. I don't have one. And I think for those in the know that we don't have this level of documentation. A lot of it sort of go back. Morris Days and Maury Roos sitting up here in the front row did a lot of depletion studies. So some of it is like his product. And sometimes the documentation isn't there, so we don't know who made what contribution. We just have it, have the number. So now that's gone. We can now explain every number that's in CalSim3. That's a change and really good feeling. As a summary, I'm toward the end of my talk. It's just the stats. So I think, sort of browse through if you want. So it goes with what we said all along, better spatial representation. Bottom row, XA is history. We don't use it anymore. CBC, free. Joe Biden contribution and their group. So, and with all of that, CalSim2 takes about 60 minutes, less than 50 minutes with the groundwater DLL in place. So that's something, isn't it? So that's
how many years?
94 years. So it's 11 more years and lesser time. And with the groundwater DLL in place. So that's not too bad of a deal. I think I'm done. I cover that. Purpose of this 2 days is to fully, unreserved sharing. So you may feel a little bit overwhelmed by the presentations that's going to follow starting part 2 on down. But so if you can bear with it and with the idea that the presenter's intent is to fully, completely share what is that we have. That's what we try to do, and we'll continue to do it that way. And then the second goal is, I've said it multiple times, review, comment. I don't know whether we set, did we set the period of this beta period yet? No, the review period? I think it's open. Yeah, I don't think it's officially set, 90 days or something, right? So, but I think some point in time, these guys, especially Joe Biden, will start thinking, let's think about some time frame now. So he's really good at managing, updating, documenting, who did what, leaving a good trace behind, that sort of stuff. So you're going to hear some numbers, down the road. We're not going to leave it open, forever, because we want to make this journey to the final version of CalSim3 before the end of this year? What is the answer? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yeah.
We sure hope so.
Yeah. So, okay. I think I'm done. Thank you very much.